Chilling tales for dark nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications.
It started out like any other workday. I had houses to sell and people who wanted to buy them. Honestly, I've always found being a realtor embarrassingly easy. People seek you out and ask you to sell them incredibly high-ticket items. I've done other sales jobs, and you always have to talk the buyers into extras, into upgrades, all for a tiny commission. With houses, it's so much easier. Your customers walk in already prepared to sign their life away for the next 30 years, so it's easy to convince them to go for the nicer house, the better neighborhood, the higher price tag, the bigger commission, from my point of view. Obviously, it's not always completely smooth. I've had some real nightmare clients. Who hasn't? I've been yelled at, talked down to, insulted, even physically threatened on a couple of occasions, but 90% of my job was just about keeping a smile on my face and saying empty phrases like, "Okay, I hear you," or "Let's keep looking." Easy as pie. So I didn't expect this day to be anything out of the ordinary. Houses had been selling well lately, and I'd just gotten several new ones added to my roster. If I kept my numbers up, I was on track to have the most sales of the quarter, so I was pretty motivated to get out there and get folks into a new house. I usually like to do a walkthrough beforehand to make sure that there aren't any surprises, but I hadn't had a chance to do that with my upcoming afternoon showing. If I had, maybe it would have turned out a lot better for the Hubers. Then again, maybe it would have turned out a lot worse for me, so I don't know. The house looked fine from the outside. It was a California split level, a little under 2,000 square feet, a classy mix of brick and wood siding. The house and land were well maintained, and I could see that Mrs. Huber, Marilyn, was already charmed by it. It was within their price range in the school district they were looking for, and basically everything was just falling into place. I could smell an easy sale. I was going to be able to knock this one off on day one, and then it'd just be a matter of paperwork. I refrained from rubbing my hands together in glee as I walked the Hubers up to the front door, but only barely. That's how good I was feeling about this. Inside was great too, at least at first. Hardwood floors in the entry hall, big windows letting the whole place glow in the afternoon sun, nice neutral colors on the walls, and a pleasant smell in the air. It was picture-perfect staging, and the Hubers were eating it up. Irving was pointing out fancy features in the kitchen. Marilyn was talking about having people over for parties, and I just followed along pretending they needed me there. I didn't have to do a thing. The house was selling itself. Everything went perfectly right up until we were leaving. We'd finished touring the top floor, and they'd both gushed about how perfect the view from the master bedroom was. I was leading the way down the stairs, chatting over my shoulder with the Hubers and keeping one hand on the railing to guide myself along. I wasn't really paying much attention. How much attention does anyone ever pay to stairs? These were carpeted, they didn't squeak, and the wooden posts and railings were solid and attractive. They successfully connected the floors of the house. That's all you can really say about stairs. Suddenly, Marilyn broke into my patter. "Sorry, this is a strange question, but how many floors does this house have?" 3, including the finished basement," I told her, wondering why she was asking. We'd just finished walking through them all. "Right, that's what I thought. Only, this is the second flight of stairs, and we're still heading to the front hallway." I honestly had no idea what she meant at first. Obviously, it wasn't the second flight of stairs, or we would be on our way to the basement. These weren't the basement stairs. Therefore, we hadn't gone down 2 flights. I tried to think of a way to say, "You have not successfully counted to 1. That didn't sound patronizing or rude. Finding nothing, instead I said, "Well, we're here now, at least. We can..." I stopped dead on a small landing where the stairs made a right turn. It should have been just a couple more stairs to the entryway. Instead, I was looking at the hallway leading to the bedrooms. the one on the top floor of the house. I looked behind me. At the top of the stairs, I could see the hallway we just left. My mind lurched, trying to find some sense to seize onto. It was a 3-level house. I was at the base of some stairs. I could see other stairs ahead of me, leading down. Therefore, I must be on the middle level where the entryway was. It's just that I wasn't. I was on the top level, having taken stairs down to get there. "Something's wrong," I said stupidly. Irving and Marilyn reached out and held each other's hands. They looked around nervously. I realized that they were waiting for me to do something. I was in charge here, after all. Let's just take the stairs down," I suggested, suiting action to word. This time I kept my eyes focused ahead, watching every step. I could hear the Hubers walking behind me, their paired treads only a stair away. Ordinarily, I would have been annoyed to have a client stepping on my heels like that, but right now, I didn't blame them at all. 11 stairs down brought us to a right turn landing. With trepidation, I made the turn, hoping that somehow I just misunderstood something before, that I'd somehow failed to use stairs correctly. My hopes were dashed as I stepped out into the same carpeted hallway leading to the bedrooms. The ground floor was still somehow below us. The Hubers exchanged wide-eyed glances. "I don't understand this," said Marilyn. "Well, look," said Irving, trying to be reasonable. "If down doesn't work, maybe up will." He turned and began to walk back up the stairs. Struck by a sudden curiosity, I moved across the hall to look at the stairs leading down. Marilyn kept her position on the landing so she could see both of us. When the stairs came into view, I saw exactly what I'd feared. Although Irving had gone up the stairs behind me, I was now ahead of him on the floor he was climbing to. His face blanched when he saw me. This is impossible." He looked back at Marilyn below me. "How is this happening?" "I can see you," Marilyn called weakly to me. From both directions, I can see you at the top of the stairs," she pointed. "And at the bottom over here." She turned her head and gestured. Suddenly, feeling weak, I sat down against the wall, taking solace in its solidity. I closed my eyes and pressed my fingers to my temples, willing this all to be some sort of fever dream. "Are you all right?" Irving called. I heard his footsteps start toward me. He was only 4 or 5 steps from the top. Somehow, though, they kept going. I opened my eyes. Irving was climbing the stairs, a look of terror on his face. He scrambled faster and faster, yet he never moved forward. Marilyn screamed. I leapt to my feet. Behind Irving, the staircase was lengthening, adding a stair beneath his feet for every step he took. I lunged forward, my hand extended for him to grab, but as I reached for him, a dozen new stairs appeared, dragging him away from me. "Go back down!" I shouted. Irving turned and tried to run, but it was too late. The stairs stretched away at a frightening rate, a corridor reaching out to infinity. Irving was reduced to a tiny speck somewhere in the middle, and although I could hear Marilyn screaming behind me, I could also hear a tiny version echoing faintly up the walls of what had been the staircase in front of me. Less than a second later, the staircase snapped back into place, the same 11 steps there should have always been. Irving was gone. Marilyn was shrieking. She had collapsed onto the landing and was clinging to the railing like it was a lifeline. She sobbed Irving's name over and over, but there was no response. Her total breakdown helped bring me back to myself. I took her by the arm and attempted to tug her to her feet. "Mrs. Huber, Marilyn, come on, please. We have to get out of here." "How?" she wailed, a question for which I have no answer. I don't know. One of the rooms, maybe? There must be." I opened the door to one of the bedrooms. Fear gripped my stomach. The door now led to another set of stairs, or more probably, the same ones. Irving! Irving! Come on, that isn't helping. Let's try going down the stairs with our eyes closed. Maybe it's an illusion. That didn't make any sense, but it was all I could come up with. It was good enough for Marilyn, at least. She closed her eyes and, still clinging to my hand, allowed me to lead her to the stairs. Okay, here's the rail. Put your hand on it. I'm not going to let go of you, I assured her. Just hold the rail for safety. I'm going to have my eyes closed too. Ready? Stay close. Here we go. My right hand on the railing, my left hand bent awkwardly behind me, I shuffled forward and felt my way onto the first step. I stepped down and felt Marilyn moved into the position beside me. Step, step, down the stairs, one shuffling movement at a time. I kept my eyes squeezed shut, letting my feet guide me. Slow though I went, after a few steps, Marilyn began to fall behind. Come on, you've got to keep up. I'm trying. You're going too fast. I'm barely moving, I thought, but did not say. I bit my tongue and took another step. From behind me, I heard Marilyn's muffled footsteps hitting the carpeted stairs. Once, twice, 3 times. My left hand, still gripped tightly in her fist, began to get pulled slowly backward. Marilyn, slow down, she begged me. You're getting too far ahead. Stop moving. Fully stationary, I risked opening my eyes. I saw what I already knew had to be true. Just as it had with Irving, the staircase was beginning to lengthen. Marilyn, I said, my voice catching in my throat. Her eyes popped open, widening in fear as she realized what was happening. Help me! Her palm started to slide through my grasp, and I did the only thing I could do. I pulled as hard as I could, yanking her off of the stairs and sending her tumbling onto me. We fell down the last 4 stairs together, crashing into the wall of the landing hard enough to crack the plaster. I saw stars and tasted blood. Shaking my head, I struggled to a standing position and found that I was now looking at the entryway, its gleaming wooden floors a shining beacon of hope. Marilyn was still sobbing on the ground, her arms wrapped around my leg. I'd like to believe that I wouldn't have bolted for the door and left her there in any case, but I certainly wasn't going to do it with the death grip she had on me. Marilyn, we made it. We're here. We can get out. She looked up, fearful and disbelieving. Come on, I coaxed, lifting her to her feet once more. Look, there's the door. We can go. But Irving! I know. We'll come back for him, I lied. There was no chance I was ever setting foot in that house again. We can get help. We've just got to go. I half dragged her to the door. I was certain that it was going to be another trick, that the hallway would begin to stretch or the outside door would open to more stairs, but I had no idea what else to do. When I opened the front door and it actually led to the outside, I burst into tears. Eyes streaming, I raced down the brick steps. Marilyn kept pace with me, both of us running as fast as we could until we collapsed against our cars, chests heaving. Her hair was wild, her knees were skinned, her blouse was torn. I was certain I looked no better. I could feel a painful wetness on the back of my head where I'd banged into that wall, but my hair seemed to be keeping most of the blood in place, and if that was what it took to get out of that nightmare, I counted it a small price to pay. We stared at each other for several minutes. My heart rate gradually slowed. My mind attempted to tell me that I couldn't have seen what I thought I had. It was a bright, sunny suburban day. Houses didn't unfold into impossible geometries, not in a nice neighborhood like this. If Irving had been there with us, I might have even convinced myself it was some sort of hallucination. But he wasn't. The house had him. "We have to go back in," Marilyn said, but her voice lacked conviction. I shook my head, eliciting a stab of pain. "No way. Sorry, no way." "But Irving's in there!" "We'll get him. We'll get help. We can, I don't know, tie a rope to the outside or make a human chain or something. Something. But we can't go back in there like this. I can't just leave him." "We'll come." My response was interrupted by a loud slam from the house. Our heads both jerked up to see the front door standing wide open. Irving stood in the door frame, gripping the edges like his life depended on it. He gave a cry that was half a yell of triumph and half a sob, and then he fell bonelessly down the brick steps to the pathway below. Marilyn and I raced over. Irving was in bad shape, and not just from the fall. His clothes were tattered and filthy. His hands were bloody and blistered. His hair was ragged. And although he had been clean-shaven when we stepped into the house, he had now what appeared to be several days' growth of beard. "Irving! Irv! Marilyn cradled his head in her arms, but Irving did not move. I checked his pulse and was relieved to find it present. I let Marilyn attempt to wake him up for another minute, and then I took out my cell and called the 911. I lied to the dispatchers. I said he'd had some sort of an attack, that I thought maybe it was blood sugar related. I said his wife was here and would hopefully be calmed down enough when they arrived to give them better information. I gave them the address and told them we would meet them at the street. They said not to move him, and I told them that that was where he had collapsed. Then I hung up the phone so I could drag him to the curb. The open door of the house gaped mockingly behind me, challenging me to come back inside. It scared me to look into it, but it scared me more to have my back to it. So I simply got as far away as I could and waited for the EMTs. The ambulance took the Hubers away, leaving me alone. With no idea what else to do, I got into my car and drove back to the office. It wasn't even really a conscious decision. I was in shock and running on autopilot. I wandered into the office looking like I'd been mugged in the parking lot. I stumbled to my desk, ignoring my coworkers' questions, and fell into my chair. I stared at my reflection in the blank monitor as their chatter passed over my head. After a few minutes, a hand fell onto my shoulder. I looked up to see my coworker, Marianne. "What happened?" Him. There was an attack. He had an attack, Keeping her voice low, her eyes darting around to see who was listening, she asked, "Was it a house?" "What? A house? Did something go wrong in the house?" I stared at her dumbly. She pressed on. "Monsters, bent space, distortions of reality?" I nodded. "Okay, here." She passed me a business card, one from our agency. The name on it was Gray Michael. It wasn't anyone I knew. I started. Marianne frantically shushed me. "Do not say his name until you're ready to talk to him. Go get cleaned up first. Take a moment. Don't stumble into this." "Who is this?" She glanced furtively around again. "He's a coworker. He specializes in difficult houses. He can help you here." I looked around the office. It wasn't that large of a space. "Okay, but who is he?" "When you're ready, go out into the hallway. His office is right there." "I've never seen it." "You will once you say his name." Marianne moved off into the office, spreading a cover story about a client fainting and dragging me with him down some steps. I turned the card over in my hands a few times, then tucked it into my pocket and went to wash up. I wasn't wholly successful at getting all of the blood out of my hair, but by the time I was done, I looked fairly presentable and felt a whole lot more awake. My brain was working overtime, trying to convince me that I'd imagined the whole thing, that I'd fallen and hit my head and made the rest of it up. But there was still a 911 call in my recent calls log, and I knew that if I called the local hospitals, I'd be able to find out where the Hubers had been admitted pretty easily. I planted my hands on the bathroom counter and stared at myself in the mirror, trying to decide if I was looking into the eyes of a crazy person. In the end, I shrugged and turned away without an answer. "All right," I said to myself. "Let's go find Gray Michael." His office, as Marianne had said, was right there. The name was on a plaque on the door. It was impossible to miss, yet I'd somehow walk past it every day. I knocked lightly on the door. "Come in," called a mild voice. I opened the door and met Gray Michael. He was normal. Aggressively normal. If I told you to picture a generic white male, you'd be thinking of him. His smile was pleasant and professional, a perfect stock image look. He gestured to a chair in front of his desk. "Come in, close the door, have a seat. So, you have a problem." I followed his instructions. "How do you know I have a problem?" "You have my card," he said, as if that explained everything. "Tell me what happened." I started to speak, but he quickly held up one thin finger. "Not what you think happened, not what must have happened because what you remember can't possibly be true. Tell me what happened, in order, without apology or prevarication." Something in his voice made his words less of an instruction and more of an unassailable command. I opened my mouth and let the words fall out. When I had finished, Gray Michael nodded his head. "Simple enough." "Simple?" "Yes, this is small, a fledgling. One trick, very little power. Shall we go?" "Go where?" I was totally lost in this conversation. "To the house. To remove it." I started to refuse, but Gray Michael stood up from his desk and brushed invisible dust from his suit. "Drive. It will give you something to do." Without thinking, my keys were in my hand and I was heading for the door. We were out of the parking lot before I even realized he was riding in my passenger seat. "I can't go back in there," I told him. "You won't have to. Only one step, so that you can declare your request for assistance." "What?" "You need to say the following phrase, as exactly as you can. I, as the duly appointed representative tasked with the preservation of this home and its contents, hereby invite Gray Michael inside." Only he didn't say Gray Michael. His lips said Gray Michael. The sound said Gray Michael. But what I felt was something dark and broken, words of tortured malice. We passed the rest of the drive in silence. Gray Michael seemed content to watch the scenery while I was simply trying to calm my panicked brain. When we pulled up outside, the front door was closed. "I left that open," I told Gray Michael. "It's not important," he said, getting out of the car. "This will all be over soon." My courage failed me as I approached the front door. If it had still been open, I think I could have stepped inside. But to grasp the handle and open it myself was beyond me. I can't do this." Said Gray Michael. "Are you saying that you've wasted my time?" I took an immediate step backward from the look he gave me, banging my back against the house's front door. No! "Then open the door and invite me inside." I opened it without hesitation. My fear of the house hadn't lessened, but I'd found something I feared more. I took a single step inside. "That's far enough," said Gray Michael. "Now, invite me." I cleared my throat. "I, as the duly appointed representative tasked with the preservation of this home and its contents, hereby invite Gray Michael inside." His name twisted like burned rope in my throat. It felt like nails on bone, carving secret messages on my skeleton, words that would never leave me. "Thank you," he said, stepping past me into the house. "Now, please remain on the porch and hold this door closed. Do not open it for anything. It could be very dangerous for you if you do." He closed the door in my face. I took hold of the handle and exerted a gentle pull. I wondered how long I was going to have to stand like this, and what I would have to say to anyone who asked what I was doing. Those thoughts were driven from my mind when the screaming started. I jumped, nearly losing my grip on the door handle, but fear of Gray Michael kept me in place. The screams seemed to come from the house itself, as if the bricks and boards were crying out. They ranged up and down in pitch, sounding sometimes human, but always terrifying. Then the scratching started, desperate clawing against the door. I felt tugging against the handle, and I leaned my weight back, heedless of the steps behind me. Not for anything, Gray Michael had said, and I would not open it for anything. My blood ran cold as voices began pleading with me. Children, old folks, family members, they begged and cried to get out. I stood fast. They slowly died away. "Thank you," said Gray Michael from behind me. I spun around to find him standing at the bottom of the steps, not a hair out of place. "You can release the door now. The house has been cleansed." "What do we do now?" "By preference, you take me back to the office. You have a house to sell, after all, and I have other work to do." We were silent again on the drive back. At one point, he yawned. I glanced over and caught a glimpse into his mouth. It opened like a cave, distant lights glittering inside. He saw me watching and raised an eyebrow. I said nothing. We shook hands back at the office. "I'll be seeing you around," Gray Michael said. I've been trying not to think too hard about what that might mean. In the meantime, anyone looking to buy a house, I can guarantee with absolute certainty that it is not haunted. Gray Michael made sure of that.
Every summer back when I was a kid, our family would pack up and hit the road, traveling from California to Pennsylvania to visit my mom's family. We were the typical unit, Mom and Dad and 3 brothers, Jake and Jiry, and me, Johnny, the kid brother, 5 years the younger. Jake and Jiry were just a year apart, so they usually hunted as a pack, and I was the whole menu. Most of it was good, clean fun of the typical sort you find among precocious siblings, looking back anyways. Like all big brothers, mine perfected the art of spotting whatever could be used to get my goat, work me up, or get me to start bawling. Whenever they found one of these little gold mines, they worked it mercilessly until the vein dried up and they were forced to move on for greener grass elsewhere in my tender young psyche. One thing that never did fail with me, one vein that never did dry up, was the roadman. I never heard much about the roadman except when we were actually on the road, and even then Jake and Jiry saved any talk of his exploits for the desert, where they said he lived. For the long open road between cities and towns, that was his territory. The place where he hunted anybody stupid enough to try making a run for it across the desert after dark. Then I heard all the usual stuff about kids like me being kidnapped and carried off into the night where their parents would never find them. Sometimes the stories about the roadman had him even roasting the kid alive over a campfire and eating them whole, or forcing him to work long back-breaking hours in some unlit subterranean caverns, mining God knows what abominable substance or toxic mineral. Like I said, The usual bullshit. The first time I heard about the roadman, I must have been about 5 or 6. We were driving late at night, and I was just minding my own business when I noticed Jake and Jiry were strangely quiet. I looked at them, and Jake, the oldest, started whispering in Jiry's ear. They both started snickering, and of course I wasn't going to be left out, so I demanded to know what they were talking about. Jake took an exaggerated gulp of air and grimaced, jerking his thumb toward the back window. He said he thought he had seen the roadman coming up behind us about a mile back, saw his headlights, and they were closing fast. My mom shot Jake a look over the seat and glared, saying I was too damn young for that nonsense and they'd better knock it off. That shut them right up, but they still kept glancing out the back window and then nervously at each other. That was the last I heard of it until the next year when we were back on the highway heading east, but I sure as hell hadn't forgotten about what had my brother spooked and made my mom hush him up. The next year, sure enough, we're on the road late at night. My mom was asleep and my brothers were staring out the rear window at the road swallowed up in complete darkness behind us like it ceased to exist. Across one particularly long stretch, I started to feel kind of weird. There was nothing but a wall of black on either side of the road, and everything beyond the highway seemed to have vanished. There wasn't another car in sight, no signs, nothing, and I was hoping we'd come to a gas station, anything where there'd be people around, something to break this monotonous emptiness. Then, just up ahead, I saw a light, and my heart jumped with relief, praying it was a gas station or roadside diner. My dad usually stopped every chance he got to stretch his legs and grab some coffee. I hadn't realized just how nervous I was until I saw that light. In another minute we reached it, and my heart sank, and I almost gasped in despair. It was just a sign, an advertisement with some reflectors on it. Not even a real light that would have meant there was a town nearby. Even at a distance, it had caught our headlights and allowed me the deluded hope of a bustling roadside oasis with cars and happy travelers, kids running around, and hopefully a cold case where I could grab a grape knee-high out of the freezing water while my dad shot the breeze for a few minutes with the clerk. But no. That was just too much to hope for when you're just a kid on the road in the middle of the night. So on we drove, but I noticed the way Jake and Jiry looked at that sign, the way their eyes followed it as we sped past. They'd fallen for the cruel trick as much as I had. I felt like I'd been intentionally tricked, like something was playing with me, was somewhere out there in the darkness laughing at me. From then on, those reflectors always had a kind of sinister sheen to them, and I hated the sight of them. A bit later, I heard Jiry whispering and trying to wake Jake up. Mom was snoring. I looked at Jiry, and he just mouthed, "Roadman," but I could see he was really scared, and not just faking it to get me going, so we all looked out the back window, and I got up on my knees to see better. There was a pair of headlights on the road behind us getting bigger by the second. I told myself it was just another car, but was afraid my older brothers knew better than I about this stuff. A couple of minutes later, the car caught up to us. It was a dirty yellow convertible with fins and the top down. I looked to see who was driving, figuring it was probably just some family like us. Dad at the wheel and a mom asleep with some kids dozing in the back. But no, it was just a guy. I could see that as he passed us. He didn't look our way, but he looked like a cowboy. Taking a few seconds too long to clear our car, he finally pulled ahead and then floored it. In a few seconds he was gone, and I felt my shoulders and stomach relax. Every year from then on it was the same thing. We'd pass through that one stretch of desert, and there'd be no one around for hours. Then some lights would appear behind us. Soon they'd overtake us and speed off down the road. But I was always scared shitless when I saw those same headlights, every damn time. I was always on my knees at that back window, on the lookout for anything that might try and gain on us or catch us. My heart would pound in my chest so hard I couldn't decide if I wanted my dad to speed up so he could outrun those damned lights, or slow down so they could catch up and move on as soon as possible. The summer of my 11th birthday, I was watching the lights as they closed the distance between us. Every mile or so, there was a dip in the road where the lights would disappear, and then appear again in a few seconds. One time, as the lights disappeared, I waited for them to reappear again, but they didn't. They were just gone. The thing was, there were no roads or turnoffs on this desolate stretch. If whoever it was had pulled off the road and turned into the desert itself, we would have still seen their lights, but those lights were gone. About an hour later, more lights, the same ones or different I couldn't tell, appeared behind us and started closing in fast. It could have been the same car. Maybe he just pulled over for a few minutes of sleep, but I didn't really think that was it at all. Soon the car caught up with us and pulled up alongside. It was the yellow convertible with fins and the top down. I couldn't believe it. A little part of me said it was just some local guy, the same guy we had seen years back. I brushed that idea off with a sneer. My heart felt like a caged animal gone wild, and it was all I could do to get a breath. When the car was alongside us, the guy turned and looked right at me. I swear we had eye contact as he grinned at me and then roared off. He disappeared for a second into a dip in the road. The thing is, though, he never reappeared, and no lights turned off into the desert. Even my dad mentioned it, saying it was the damnedest thing. Where'd that guy go? That kind of stuff. That experience sort of ripped the lid off some part of me so deep inside I never really knew existed before. I was starting to suspect something because of the way I always felt out on that road whenever I saw those lights behind us, and how many more times than not it was a yellow convertible with fins and the top down, and hardly ever a car with a mom and dad and some kids in the back. Nobody said anything about it, and I was too scared to bring it up, still hoping it was just a kid's overactive imagination. I still always loved going on road trips, but I dreaded the long runs through that particular stretch of desert. Eventually, Jake went off to college and stopped going on family vacations. Then it was just Jiry and me staring out the back window, watching, almost hoping we'd see those damn lights so we could get it over with. Like the time that yellow convertible caught up with us and passed us by and disappeared down the road. And then about 15 minutes later, he passed us again. A few miles later, that car was stopped, and the driver was just standing there with his thumb out like he had a flat or something and wanted a lift. I prayed my dad would just sail on past and not stop. This was long before cell phones, and my dad said he'd never pick up hitchhikers with Mom and us kids in the car. When we hit the next town, he'd send somebody back from a gas station. Maybe the fella'd get a pickup by some trucker on his own. The thing was, though, we passed the guy again about 10 miles up the road walking back the way he'd come. But there had been no other cars for someone to have given him a ride. Then the lights appeared behind us and he passed us going so fast I could hardly make out the car. But it was him all right. It was that same guy. That was the last year Jiry went with us. He'd moved in with Katie and they started taking their own vacations. So I was on my own with the folks apparently clueless up in the front seat. My mom always slept through the desert, so she never saw anything anyway. My dad sure did because he often said it seemed strange, but he'd always shake his head and pull out the thermos of coffee and take a few swigs and say no more about it. The last few times I went on vacation with the folks before I moved out on my own was just more of the same. I was still terrified every time I saw those lights behind us on the road, and I felt like we had to outrun them, stay ahead of them, not let them catch up or catch us. I couldn't really make sense of it. No doubt there was something weird out there on that highway. The way it made me feel, the way I always saw that same grimy cowhand in his beat-up old yellow convertible with the top down. It had to be just some local dude, right? Kids have pretty powerful imaginations, and my brothers had really done a number on me with that roadman shit. But the thing was, whoever it was, he never did anything but drive up and down the road and stare at us. Stare at me, mostly. It was just some guy, had to be. Whatever. It was the fear that filled in all the blanks and made me know I never wanted that guy to catch up with us. I vowed never to drive past dark through the desert when I was out on my own, not on that stretch of road. I never forgot about the roadman, even when I went off to college and moved out into the world of my own adventures. I could never get a straight answer out of Jiry and Jake about whether they had made up the whole roadman thing to scare me, or if they had heard about it someplace else. They seemed kinda weird about it, and by now Jake had little Jake, and didn't want me talking about that stuff in front of the boy. But the thing was still always kind of fresh with me because I didn't quite know what to make of the roadman and his antics. It was like I always had one foot anchored right back there in those days. Oddly enough, I didn't do much to try and shake it off or explain it away either. 5 or 6 years passed and I had my own small business running organic produce all around the Southwest, servicing Tex-Mex joints. It was a good job. I loved being on the road, and by now I had plenty of friends along the way who'd put me up for the night. It was a sweet gig and I really enjoyed it. One Friday I got an order from a brand new customer. Coyote's Kitchen had heard about me and wanted to give me a try. It was a last-minute rush delivery, and I suspected the folks at Coyote's had come up short with another distributor and called me in a pinch. No problemo. So I loaded up and set out for Prescott, Arizona, from my place in Barstow, a trip of about 5 hours. Any way you cut the cards, I wouldn't see Prescott before 2 a.m. I loaded up and set out. It was a nice summer evening and the road was fairly empty. I was making good time, so I stopped off at a roadside gas stop, the kind that has hot snacks and damn good coffee in half a dozen flavors. So I fueled up, filled my travel thermos, and grabbed a handful of Slim Jims and something that was mostly sugar. It was around midnight when it hit me that I hadn't seen another car in over an hour, and there were no roadside stops on this leg of the local state highway like there are out on the big interstates. I chuckled. It was a lot like the stretch of highway where I used to see what my brothers and I called the roadman back when we were kids. I glanced over my shoulder a few times and kept one eye on the road and the other glued to the rearview mirror. Force of habit in familiar territory, I guess. A while later, movement caught my attention to my left. I jerked my head and saw a car right beside me. Passing so fast, all I could see was a blur as I shook my head in shock and slammed on the brakes. I must have dozed off for a second and hadn't seen him until he was right on top of me, and then he sped off and left me in his dust. That was a wake-up call. Like my dad before me, I picked up my coffee thermos, but it was long empty. About half an hour later, I saw headlights on the road behind me. The back of my neck prickled, and I unconsciously shoved my foot against the accelerator. The guy, gal, or whoever was really traveling because they caught up just a little too fast. As he whizzed past, I saw unbelievably that it was a yellow convertible with fins, top down, and a cowboy-looking guy. The very same cowboy-looking guy, touching the brim of his hat and grinning as he sped past. I almost lost it at that point. But why, really? Clearly, this kind of guy is a classic around here, and they always seem to have old cars. Either that or I was hallucinating. Whatever, I was wide awake with eyes on the road from then on, which was good because when I saw more headlights behind me, I almost crapped myself. When they disappeared behind the dip in the road, I wasn't all that surprised when they didn't reappear at the next rise. Nor was I surprised when 5 miles later I saw the convertible stop by the side of the road, the driver thumbing for a lift. I was thoroughly shit-shanked, but again not exactly surprised, and I kept on going. I looked at my watch. It was 1:30. I'd been flooring it for the last few miles and had to start seeing signs for to turn off to Prescott any time now. That's when my tire blew, and I fishtailed off the road into the dirt in a cloud of dust and just sat there rocking back and forth for a few seconds. Being the idiot that I am, my spare was in the back all right, but it was flat from the last roadside mishap, and I'd been too lazy to get it repaired. I just sat there for a few minutes. How many miles to the next gas station? There was nothing as far as I could see, no lights off in the distance toward the mountains on either side of the road that might mean there was a ranch nearby, or even a shack where a solitary range hand might be on night watch. Nothing. So I got out and started walking down the road. I'd gone about a mile when I saw lights coming up behind me. I shuddered to think, but relaxed when a station wagon drove past and slowed down. I stuck out my thumb, but the mom at the wheel just shrugged and pointed at the back, which was full of kids. Then she sped on and disappeared into the night. I couldn't blame her. So I kept walking, miserable that I would be leaving a new client in the lurch. I was hoping to still see a ride come by, maybe a guy in a pickup who'd take a chance so I could get to a station and call the folks at Coyote Kitchen to say I was going to be late. That's when I saw something up ahead in the middle of the road. Sometimes you saw cows just standing there. Not at night usually, but a stray might wander off and get confused in the dark. Or it could have been an accident. If it was, I knew it must be pretty bad because no one was moving. It was no cow, and it was no accident either. It was a yellow convertible with the top down, parked across the narrow highway. The long, lean driver was braced against the hood, arms crossed over his chest, just staring in my direction like he was waiting for me. I slowed but kept on walking. It was the old cowhand, the same guy I'd seen all those times on vacation with my folks. He was worse for the wear, dark with dust and road grime, and more weathered than I'd remembered. As I got closer, he opened up a wide, toothy grin and waved to me. "Hey, Johnny, I've been waiting for you. I was just about to give up hope." He added with a roar of laughter and then spit something out onto the ground. I slowed again but kept on walking, my arms dangling like dead weight at my sides. There was nowhere else to go, and I was like a man sleepwalking or staggering drunk. As soon as I got up to him, he put his arm over my shoulders and we started walking. The cowboy started talking, and all I could do was listen. "Yeah, Johnny, I've been waiting a long time for you to come by again. I saw you back then with your folks. Sure I did." We walked out into the desert, and he just kept talking. "Your ma always slept along that road, didn't she? She didn't want to see me, but she knew I was there. And your pa, him too. He even said so, didn't he? Yeah, but he always pushed it aside, saying I was just his imagination. Those brothers of yours, Jake and Jiry, they used to believe, I guess. Wanted to believe. But then they got too damn full of themselves like your dad. Told themselves I was just bunk. Stuff to scare little kids. I sure scared you, didn't I, Johnny?" All I could do was nod. The cool night air settled on me and I started to shiver. But it was something more than just that. "Yeah, but you, Johnny, you believed in me right away. You always did. And you saw me, too. Saw me full in the face. Looked me square in the eyes. That means a lot. he said, pointing to his own eyes with 2 fingers. "Not like your brothers who only saw me out of the corner of their eye. Pretty sure they saw something, but no damn idea what the hell it was. But you, Johnny, you saw. You knew. Hell, you believed." He fell silent then, and we just kept walking. "And I've been waiting for you to come back by ever since. You see, Johnny, it's time for me to move on, you know? Goodbye, Johnny. I always knew you'd come back this way one day." The road stretches out ahead of me, far as the eye can see. There must be 50 miles either way before you come to any town or gas station. It's just 2 empty lanes of tarmac in the middle of a sea of gray desert from horizon to horizon. I've been on this run now for many years. Can't remember exactly how many, but I know it's a lot. My folks are long dead now, of course. Jake and Jiry too, I suppose. I'd never see them again anyway, things being what they are. It's dark now, but then it always is, here on this stretch of the highway. Up ahead, a car comes into view, and I floor the accelerator of my delivery van. I come up alongside that car pretty quick, and I see a kid in the back seat, on his knees, eyes glued to the back window, and a look of sheer terror, and something else, curiosity maybe, on his face. When I pass by, I grin at that kid and touch the brim of my hat so he knows I'm real, so he'll remember me in the days and years to come. I see his mouth making words at me through the window. The road man, his silent lips gasp in my direction, and I nod and wave. That's right, kid. I am the road man. For now.
Brenna had been preparing for this fight for months. She had thought she was ready, convinced herself that she could handle it. Now, as the last few miles ticked by on her car's odometer, the leaden weight sitting in her stomach told her otherwise. She thought about turning around, although she knew that wasn't really an option. If she skipped family Thanksgiving, then things would really blow up. Besides, she liked her family. She was looking forward to seeing them. College was great in a lot of ways, but it wasn't home. Her friends cared about her, but they didn't offer the unconditional love that her parents did. Unconditional love. Brenna focused on that. Her father absolutely did love her. He was always there for her, his gruff, macho exterior melting away whenever she needed comfort or caring. He loved her and was proud of her, and had never hesitated to tell her that. He'd get over this. Brenna's car jounced up and down. She turned onto the long, rutted country driveway leading to her parents' house. The woods pressed in tightly around her, the trees bursting with fall's fiery colors. She could feel college slipping away. Out here, the city shrank into memory. The country was a different world. Her father's world. The house came into view, a bold robin's egg blue against the reds and oranges of the woods. Brenna parked her car and waited for what she knew was coming. Seconds later, twin thumps sounded against the door of her car as shaggy faces shoved themselves up against her window. "Rebel Moose, get down!" came a deep bellow from the front door of the house, and the dogs leapt away, wagging their tails excitedly as they ran in circles. Brenna grinned at the familiarity of it all. It was good to be home. She put on her face mask and stepped out of the car, hands out to pet each dog and to stop them from bowling her over with their enthusiasm. They shoved happily against her, tongues licking and tails thrashing back and forth, beating her about the legs. With effort, she made her way through the fur tornado and up the steps of the front porch. "Good to see you home, baby girl," said her father, picking her up in an enveloping hug. He frowned as he put her down. "You're wearing one of those stupid masks. You think your mom and I picked up diseases way out here?" Brenna sighed. "It's to protect you, Dad," she said. "I'm sure you and Mom are fine out here in the woods, but I've been sharing a dorm bathroom with 11 other girls, and I promise you, they are not all taking reasonable precautions." "I hope you're not going to wear that thing the entire time you're home." "Only while I'm awake." "Very funny. I want to be able to see you smile, that's all. Is that so wrong?" "I took a test before I came out here today. They'll give me the results tomorrow or the day after. Once they tell me I'm clear, no more mask." "Oh, good. I was wondering how you're planning on eating dinner with us with a mask on. I thought your mother and I were going to have to eat that Thanksgiving turkey all by ourselves." Brenna braced herself. "Well, you're going to have to anyway." Her father scowled quizzically. "What does that mean?" "I've decided to become a vegetarian, Dad." Thunder built on his brow. "Since when?" "Since about 3 months ago." "What put that harebrained notion in your head?" "It's not harebrained. It's better for the environment and better for the world in general, which, if you haven't noticed, could use a bit of help right now." "Mary!" her father shouted over his shoulder into the house. "Do you know what your daughter's done?" "I know," her mother's voice drifted out. "Hi, Brenna. Welcome home." "But did you hear what she said?" "I heard. That's why I said I know. Are you going to let her into the house or just leave her on the porch for the entire week?" Brenna's mother appeared in the hallway behind her father, barely visible past his bulk. Despite the difference in their sizes, he moved aside at a gentle touch from her hand, stepping backward to allow her past to hug her daughter. "Hi, baby. Come on in, don't mind your father." "She'd better mind me," he grumbled, closing the door behind them. "Don't mind him in my house." "Need me to set the table for dinner, Mom?" "No, I've already got it. You just come sit down. Have you been eating okay at college?" "Clearly not," her father muttered. "What with being a vegetarian and all? Hasn't had protein in 3 months." "I'm doing fine, Mom. Thank you for asking," Brenna said pointedly. "The dining halls have plenty of options." "And that's another thing," her father broke in again. "What are you going to eat while you're here? You can't expect your mother to make a separate meal for you every time. Especially not after springing this on her like this. She made a dinner for you and—" "I made a vegetarian meal for her, Boris," Mary said. What? Huh? You knew about this?" "She told me months ago." Brenna looked shamefaced as her father wheeled to look at her, his expression wounded. "But you couldn't tell me? Poor old country dad doesn't have the sophistication to handle a revelation like this, huh? No, he wouldn't be able to wrap his old-fashioned stupid brain around it, and there'd be a big fight. Better just put it off, right?" "Dear," said Mary, "assuming that's her argument, you're really sort of proving her point right now." Morris sputtered, tried out a few more words, and fell silent. After a second, he broke into a big laugh. I suppose I am. Fine. So, I'm set in my ways. They're not such bad ways, are they?" "They're your ways, and I love you just the way you are," Brenna said, giving her father a hug. He wrapped an arm around her and shook his head ruefully. "A vegetarian. After all the time I spent teaching you to hunt, too. I suppose that's off the table now, too." Brenna nodded. "Afraid so." "Is that what this is really about? Did you give up eating meat just so that you wouldn't have to get up before dawn and go sit in a tree stand with your old man anymore?" "Don't be silly, Dad," Brenna told him. "I went to college to get away from that." Her father laughed again, easily this time. Brenna felt herself relax. She told herself all along that it would be fine once he got past the initial shock, but it was still a relief to see it happening. She knew that she was still in for a lot of pointed comments for a long time to come, but that was fine. She and her father had always needled each other for all sorts of reasons. This would just be one more thing in his arsenal, with no real malice behind it.
All right, let's see what meal magic your mother's whipped up. If anyone can make a meal without nothing but sides, it's her.
Brenna rolled her eyes. Oh my god, Dad, you're like a parody of a straw man argument right now. Is that what you've got going on under here? Are you all straw? She poked him in his belly.
Show some respect,
he said, lightly smacking her hand away.
It's a hunter's paunch, that is. Shows my prowess. If I can get enough food to feed my family and have seconds too.
We can all do that these days, Dad. It's called DoorDash. Sit down, both of you, or you'll both be experiencing the joys of outdoor living and scavenging for food firsthand. Mary pointed at the chairs. Brenna and her father sat down as ordered, both grinning. Mom, are you sure I can't help you with anything? No, you're fine. You're on cleanup, though. Unless I hear your father make one single crack about vegetarianism during the meal, in which case he's doing the dishes. As Brenna opened her mouth, her mother continued. It doesn't count if you bait him into it. Brenna closed her mouth again. Her father made a face at her, and she stuck her tongue out at him. Then, the food was before them, and they were all too busy passing plates and tasting dishes to say much. After the meal, Brenna was in the kitchen washing the plates when she heard her father's heavy tread behind her.
You sure I can't talk you into coming out hunting with me tomorrow?
He asked. Brenna thought of the bleary wake-up, of the hours of sitting still, of the cold air slowly working its way through her layers of clothes, and shook her head. Sorry, too vegetarian now. Her father grinned.
You never were that into it. Well, I'm going out in the morning if you change your mind.
Oh, I have a present for you, to take with you tomorrow. Wait here, I'll go get it from the car. She tossed the damp dishcloth at her father and hurried out of the room.
If this is just a trick to get me to do the dishes, it won't work,
he called after her. He was already picking up the nearest plate to dry it, though. Brenna returned a few moments later, a large wrapped box in her hands. Here, happy birthday.
My birthday's not for a month,
he protested, taking the gift. Yeah, but you need this for when you're sitting around outside freezing your tail off. So, you're getting it early. Boris stripped away the paper and opened up the box beneath. Inside was a mass of gray and brown fur, so thick and silky that it looked alive.
What is this?
He asked, pulling out of the box and shaking it free. The fur unfolded, revealing itself to be a coat large enough to cover Boris's bulk. It felt warm and luxurious in his hands. His fingers sank in, getting lost in the folds. It's a coat to keep you warm, Brenna said. It seemed admirably suited to that purpose. Even having been sitting out in the car for the evening, it was already warm. The thick material trapped all available heat, keeping it close. Try it, honey, Mary called from the kitchen doorway. Let's see how it fits. The garment fit beautifully, the thick fur wrapping comfortably around him. Boris smiled as he put it on, feeling like a Viking. The coat even had a hood, large enough to enclose his head in a little bubble of warmth, but light enough to sit comfortably. Boris turned back and forth, showing off his coat.
How do I look?
Amazing. I'm so glad it fits.
It's fantastic.
He slid the coat off, marveling again at the softness of its material.
What's it made out of?
Fur. I don't know. Brenna shrugged, her eyes shifting sideways. I got it online, a site called SpiritHoods. They've got coats, blankets, all sorts of stuff on their site.
Wolf, maybe?
Boris ran his hands over the coat again.
It's the right colors. Anyway, could be.
He looked up suddenly.
How does this fit in with you being a vegetarian? Aren't you supposed to be throwing paint on people who wear fur?
No one does that, Dad. I just wanted you to be warm. If you don't like it, he grinned.
I love it and you know it. It's perfect. Come here.
He pulled her in for a hug. Brenna returned it gladly, but past her father she could see her mother raising an eyebrow from the doorway. Brenna shook her head slightly. and her mother shrugged. Later, out of Boris's earshot, Mary asked her daughter, "So you're not going to tell him?" "I was going to, and I didn't exactly lie to him. Fake fur is still fur, it's just no one had to skin an animal for it. He loves the way it looks and feels. You saw him." "I did," Mary agreed, "and it really is beautiful." "I know. Plus, they donate part of every sale to help save endangered animals and habitats, so it's like twice as good as actual fur when you think about it like that." "But you think your father might not think about it like that?" "No, it's just I already had the vegetarian fight with him today. I didn't want to get right back into it. I'll tell him when he gets back tomorrow. Once he's worn it for a day, he'll have to admit how good it is." "I think he's pretty sold on it already," said Mary. "But it's your gift. You do it your way." "Thank you, Mom. And thanks for not ratting me out." Boris, meanwhile, was several rooms away in front of the computer. He wanted to know more about the coat. What had Brenna said the site was called? SpiritHoods? He typed it into the search bar and hit enter. "Did you mean SpiritHood?" asked the search engine, displaying results for what Boris had accidentally typed. SpiritHood, with 2 I's instead of O's. Boris snorted and moved the cursor to click on the corrected result, when his attention was caught by one of the top results. It was a YouTube video titled "Spirits Hidden Around Us. Connect to Nature." The still showed a hunter crouched down in tall grass. Translucent wolves hunkered down around him. Despite himself, Boris was intrigued. He clicked on the video. "We're all part of the circle of life," the video began. The narrator was outside, standing in a forest clearing at night. The scene was lit by a bright moon. The speaker's camo seemed to fade in and out of the dappled shadows. Everything is made from everything else. What we wear, what we eat, what we are. Matter's form is impermanent, but the energy that imbues it never goes away, and there are ways you can tap into it. Morris's cursor was moving toward the X when the narrator continued. "Now, a lot of you are already shaking your head and getting ready to close this, so let me prove it to you. Find something near you that used to be alive. A wooden desk, a cotton shirt, a leather jacket, anything. Now, what you want to do is draw this pattern on your hand." A symbol came up on the screen, a circle broken by several bent lines and underscored with 3 dots. The order matters, so listen to my instructions and draw it as I say. If nothing happens, either I'm a crackpot or you can't follow simple directions. Either way, you've lost nothing but a couple of minutes. But if you do it right, well, let's just do the directions and you'll see. Morris looked around to make sure he was alone, then took a black marker from the desk drawer in front of him. Following along with the video, he laid down the base of the 3 dots, stretching from his wrist to his pinky. The rest of the drawing hopped around, an arc of the circle here, a line there, never a whole shape at once until everything came together at the end. And then suddenly, it was done. All of the disparate pieces united in a glorious whole. Boris compared the drawing on his hand to the image on the screen and nodded critically. They looked the same. "Now, touch the object you want to connect with," the man in the video said, and Boris placed his left hand lightly on the oak desk in front of him. Strength suffused him, a feeling of power and solidity. He could feel the desk, the chair, even the floor under his feet, as if they were all distant parts of his body. He was part of the room, of the house, aware of its small shifts and signals. He lifted his hand in wonder, feeling the air current shift around his fingers. It was an amazing sense of connection. Boris returned his attention to the video and was surprised to find that it had stopped. Making an effort, he drew himself back in, releasing his awareness of the house in order to regain full control of his body. When he pressed play, the video restarted from the beginning, and Boris impatiently skipped ahead to where he had left off. "That's something else, huh?" asked the narrator, grinning. Now, those of you who touched something wood, you probably had to skip back in the video. Trees feel slowly. Older the tree, truer that is. You can learn to dip into that without losing yourself entirely. It's just a matter of practice. Animal products. How's your sense of smell? Most animals smell better than we do. With their noses, I mean. Ears, eyes too. You're not going to get the full package off of everything, but experiment and you'll find that everything's got something to offer. Boris! Mary was in the doorway looking sleepy. Boris paused the video guiltily. You coming to bed? Boris checked the computer clock and was shocked to find out that it was past midnight. He had lost hours sitting in the sensations from the oak desk, simply being a part of everything around him.
Lost track of time, he offered. Thanks for coming to get me. I've got to be up in a few hours.
He rose slowly, still feeling the serenity that had suffused him. This was an amazing power he had stumbled across. He couldn't wait to try it out tomorrow in nature. The sky had not yet begun to lighten when Boris parked his truck and made his way quietly through the woods to his tree stand. He clambered up the ladder and hunkered down to wait, wrapped warmly in his new fur coat. With ears pricked and eyes skimming through the shadowed forest in search of any movement, Boris searched for his prey. Small sounds teased him. Speaking of creatures moving out past the range of his limited human vision, Boris thought of the pattern on his left hand and smiled. He had a new secret weapon. He gripped the coat with his left hand, waiting for a rush of sensations. But nothing happened. Boris frowned, moving his hand higher and trying again, but still nothing changed. When he opened his hand to examine the pattern, Boris immediately saw the issue. The marker had partially worn off overnight, leaving the pattern disconnected and broken. He patted his pockets but had nothing to write with. An iced-over puddle of mud glinted from the forest floor below. Boris climbed back down, broke the ice, and scooped a stick through the thick mud underneath. Painting carefully, he refreshed the marks of the pattern, arc to line, line to arc. He shook his hand to dry it in the chill night air, then blew on it. When he judged the marks dry enough, he again touched his hand to his coat. This time, he could feel something stirring. The forest brightened around him as his eyes took in more light. Sounds rose in sharper focus. He could smell something on the air, a scent of prey. But as he turned to face it, everything faded again. As soon as Boris had released his hold on his coat, the connection had faded. Frustrated, he tried to think of a solution. He wasn't going to be able to do much hunting one-handed, especially if he had to keep his mind on gripping his coat the entire time. He needed something that would stay in constant contact, automatically maintaining the connection. Suddenly, the answer struck him. The back of his neck. There were no layers between it and the coat, and with the hood up, it would remain in contact. Wishing for a mirror, he dipped the stick in the mud again and began to draw, his left hand held before him for a visual reference. At the final line, the tip of the stick snapped. Boris winced at the sharp edge dragged across his skin, stinging as he completed the pattern. With no way to check his work, he held his breath and hoped for the best as he pulled the hood up over his head. He knew immediately that he had drawn the pattern correctly. Just as immediately, he knew that something was very, very wrong. The fur was acrylic, pressed from petroleum and catalyzed into a polymer, but far, far back, it too had once been alive. As the man had said in the video, everything was made from everything else. Each drop of oil had once been part of a living thing, and the pattern dutifully drew these forth, connecting them with Boris. They came in a massive flood, thousands of minds all mixed together, rushing into Boris in a cacophony of conflicting desires. Some had been hunters, and his vision and hearing sharpened as they fought their way to the fore. Others had been prey, filling his nose with information about nearby food and distant predators. They stampeded around and around in his head, a welter of claws, scales, feathers, and teeth, drowning Boris's thoughts in a desperate sea of needs. Boris thrashed and flailed, guttural noises escaping his throat as his hands clawed at the ground. The coat stayed on, though, tiny tendrils reaching from the hood to the nape of his neck, sneaking under his skin through the symbol where the stick had scratched him. They reached inside, melding seamlessly with his body, even as the wave of consciousness roared through his mind, slowly tearing the scrape on his neck wider and wider to allow more of the coat in. Even as Boris's body started to bubble, the thoughts slowly calmed and coalesced. They began to settle on generalities that most could agree on: hunt, eat, flee, rot, fight, kill. Boris's back split open as the fibers of the coat wormed their way inside, growing through his body to blend with his flesh. He opened his mouth to scream, but the sound that emerged from his changing throat was a frightening primal snarl. His mouth stretched and shifted, the sound becoming deeper and more menacing as it went. Run, feast, grow. Simple biological imperatives pressed their way to the front. Boris rose up from the ground, panting. He had been a large man before, but now he loomed. A creature standing 8 feet tall or more, heavily furred, eyes large and predatory. His jaw snapped open and closed, tasting the early morning air. Eyes opened along his neck and sides, providing overlapping views of the world around him. A thick tail swished angrily at his back, urging him forward. The thing that had been Boris breathed deeply, tongue licking at sharp teeth. The transformation had stripped his body of resources, cannibalizing itself to build new muscles, organs, limbs, and the images of what it had lost. Feed, eat, consume. These thoughts drove him, forcing all others out of his mind. He needed to eat like he needed to breathe. Fortunately, he was now extremely well equipped to provide. The deer had fled. He could smell the sharp scent of their fear. He could chase them, but there was another smell, closer, easier. He smelled diesel and rubber, tobacco and deodorant, and beneath it all, red meat. Hot, fresh, delicious meat. He breathed in again, the air roaring into his lungs. 2 mixed scents. 2 creatures, half a mile or less. He dropped to all 6 legs and began to lope toward them, an easy stride that silently ate up the ground. He'd be on them before they knew he was there. Saliva ran from his jaws in anticipation. And after that, well, he could already smell more beyond them. The creature bared its teeth savagely. Hunting season had begun.
Everyone knew Sebastian Clark. Hailing from Ireland, he was a famed psychotherapist, a philanthropist to the community, a motivational speaker, and a devoted husband. So when word got out that he would be offering a free seminar on taking charge of your life again, the seats were full in less than a day. Rumor had it that Clark had set up a new office in the city and was also allowing any who attended to fill out applications. Supposedly, though, he only tackled the extremely difficult and unorthodox cases, the ones that other therapists simply couldn't handle, the ones that some shunned or turned a blind eye to. On the afternoon of September 19, 2019, what Dr. Clark didn't know was that by opening his door to the unknown, he would never be able to shut it again. And that was thanks to Adrian Brenner. Brenner sat in the back of the auditorium, listening as the therapist began his speech. The entire audience hung on every word that was said, Brenner included. I want you to take a moment and look around the room. Go ahead. Pause for a second and think about how many people are here trying to regain their sanity. They're your neighbors, your friends, your co-workers, your lovers, your family. Until you got into this room, you were strangers. But now you're a part of something bigger than yourself. This place is a place of safety, of healing, of rebirth. You aren't alone anymore in your problems, and it's only by working together that we can overcome them, Clark declared. A round of applause got things underway as Sebastian continued to explain how our human mind can trick us. We like to believe we're in control of our lives. It's that sense of self that helps us to wake up in the morning, go to work every day. But there is so much beyond our grasp that we can't fathom, and that can be frightening. We didn't get to choose our parents. We didn't get to decide our culture, our race. There are literally hundreds of these decisions made for us before we can even take a breath of fresh air. So truly, the only sanity we can manage is the kind we make. We have to have some mastery over our fates. And we can, once we accept this fundamental truth, the man said. The seminar went on to explain how feelings of rage and anger were just our body's way of fighting for freedom, and how that once we learn to live within our means and to aspire for realistic goals, we can have peace. Adrian loved every minute of it, but he didn't think that it would cure his own restless mind. Once the 3-hour event was over, people lined up to get a signature of Dr. Clark's book, All in Your Head, and Brenner couldn't help but smirk at the title. Given what he was afflicted by, he thought it to be ironic. The 30-year-old stood in line patiently like the rest of them, but he was already convinced that Clark would be able to help him when others could not. This was his last chance at a sane life. Finally, he stood face to face with the great man, who quickly autographed one of the leather-bound books and passed it to him. Brenner nodded in thanks and stood there for a moment, struggling to find the right words to say. "Is there something else?" Clark asked pointedly. Suddenly he froze. Unable to speak or react, he grabbed a pen from the table and scrawled a note into the book before passing it back to the doctor. It was his hope that this unusual behavior would spark the therapist's interest, and once he finished with the note, he ran off to the bathroom to calm down. "It's going to be fine. The doctor is going to help you," he insisted as he gave himself a pep talk in the mirror. His reflection didn't look as confident as he was attempting to sound. For a long moment he stared at his own image, trying to figure out which side of the glass he was actually on. Then he saw it just out of the corner of his eye. Immediately he smashed his fist against the glass, panicking and shattering the shards into his skin as he ran from the restroom. Outside, Clark was waiting. He nearly collided with the doctor, who had actually been in the process of trying to find Adrian. "What's the meaning of this?" he asked pointedly to the note in his book, and then noticing the broken and bruised hand that Brenner was cradling. "Please, you're the only one I know that can help," Adrian insisted. Sebastian called out to a few of his staff to come help the man and bandage him up. Clark didn't confirm anything about whether or not he would schedule the man a session, but Brenner could see it in his eyes. The doctor needed to know more. It would eventually consume him until he had no choice but to arrange a meeting. Sebastian Clark did not have many friends. His career was his life. He would spend long hours in the office compiling notes, trying to help the people that came to him, but often forgot about himself. Having empathy for others often comes with a great expense to oneself, and Dr. Clark paid that price tenfold. First and foremost, with his marriage. His wife became distant and despondent, angry that he would often work late to try and finish up a thesis, or he would have to volunteer for a suicide watch. But she would also always claim that she understood. It was a sacrifice they had to make. Eventually, though, time eroded her forgiveness, and she requested a legal separation. The marriage needed more fixing than any of his mentally broken patients. It caused him to nearly give up, but Clark chose to give in and try the separation. Maybe the old adage of distance makes the heart grow fonder would work in their case. This is why he came to the city, to try and rekindle whatever he had lost with Elaine, and to figure out what was going on in his own head. It wasn't working, though. He was beginning to lose sleep and not eating properly. Sometimes he also forgot to bathe, and some would whisper that he had gone mad. And maybe they were right, because when he came to the city, that was when he started having the nightmares. At first he thought that perhaps they were just part of his subconscious, dealing with the separation from his wife or handling the move. But as they became more vivid, he began to consider that maybe he was wrong about that. Maybe the dreams meant something else entirely. This is how things would play out when his insomnia took shape. Sebastian would be a child again, perhaps 6 or 7. He would wake up in his grandfather's vineyard, the one he often would spend his summers at in Ireland. The smell of the grapes and the butterflies would instantly attract him, and before he knew what was happening, young Sebastian would be chasing them here and there across the fields. It always would start off so pleasant, but it would never stay that way. Often, as he got closer to his grandfather's house, he would see storm clouds. A crack of thunder would stop him in his tracks and force him to look at the sky. A brilliant bolt of lightning would smash down from the heavens and split apart the tree he often climbed. And in the midst of the destruction he would see a shadow, an ominous figure that had to be at least 10 or 12 feet tall. The figure would move slowly from the destruction of the tree, almost as if it were hunting for something or someone. It was hard to describe precisely what the figure looked like, for the mists often made it difficult for young Sebastian to see. But one thing was certain. This was a monster of every sort of nightmare, with iron claws that could easily rip him apart, and a metal axe that could sever him in two. The creature's only purpose was clearly destruction. Perhaps most hideous of all, the beast had no head, and the blade it used to cast judgment upon others was sharp and bloodied, a clear indication that it had purposely dismembered itself. Why, the young Sebastian could not be sure, but it did seem to give the monster a sense of its surroundings more than any normal vision might, as though this act of self-harm had imbued it with a magical strength. Fear seized him in that moment. To run and hide was an impossibility, but he still tried. And even though the nightmare did not move with speed, he always felt its presence. It was always going to find him, and every pace he made to escape only caused his own body to age and deteriorate until at last the inevitable occurred. The axe would be upon his neck, and the creature would swing it high and finish him off. Only the shriek of his alarm would keep him safe, and he would wake with cold sweats. What if one time the blade fell down on him? Was it possible to die if he didn't wake? At first he thought that couldn't be possible. After all, it was just a figment of his imagination. But that changed when he met Adrian Brenner. It was after a seminar, and he was signing books dismissively, thinking little of the events of the day. He was eager to return to his hotel and to spend the night drowned in bourbon and paperwork. But then this stranger took his attention. He wasn't there for an autograph. He needed help. Ordinarily, Sebastian would always let his secretary handle these appointments, but since the office was still new, he thought having an open invitation would work best. And it did. By the end of the day, he had nearly 300 new applications, but none caught his interest as quickly as Adrian Brenner. All it had taken was one word scrawled hastily on the book that Adrian had passed back. Dullahan, the name of the ghost that he had been trying to ignore. The name he could never remember but always lingered at the edge of his mind. And Adrian Brenner knew about it. And Sebastian Clark had to know why. Their first session was on a Thursday. Dr. Clark had cleared out his entire afternoon to talk with Adrian. He got there about 3:30, a little later than expected, but it was clear that the middle-aged man was nervous about how everything would go. The doctor tried to make his office as serene and calming as possible. Having worked with other patients that were far more manic than Adrian, he figured it would be enough. I don't really know where to begin, other than I wish it had never started. It's been part of me for almost a year now, constantly harassing me in my dreams and even while awake, always looming and getting closer. Adrian told him as he settled down on the couch. "You haven't been sleeping properly." Clark guessed, and the other man only nodded. "I used to have a life, a career, and family. Heck, Doc, I guess I was just like you, working at a big law firm, helping the less fortunate. I didn't figure I needed anything from anyone. I made my own luck and climbed that corporate ladder all by myself. So why would I even think that anything would slow me down? I guess that goes to show exactly how much of a fool I am. A pompous, idealistic one at that." The doctor could already tell that Adrian preferred to talk to himself, so he carefully chose which moments to interject. "I was an accountant, had a good amount of clientele that came to me for advice over the years. It paid well, too. I devoted so much of my time to that job, I thought that I was making an impact. But then the Dullahan showed up, and everything changed." Brenner explained. "Tell me when you first started having the dreams." Sebastian told him. "Dreams? Oh no, sir. These are experiences I have while I wake. Vivid hallucinations of that headless monstrosity that follows me everywhere I go," Adrian blurted out. The therapist steepled his fingers together, clearly intrigued by this concept, and asked for more details. "I wish I could rightly say what started it or even when. It's been happening so frequently I haven't been able to rightly focus, to give these muddled thoughts the attention they deserve, but I'll try. I can at least trace back to the first instance I recorded," Adrian offered. Sebastian was taken aback to see that the man had compiled at least 4 months' worth of reports on the hallucination, including locations and time of day. "This is an impressive catalog," he said. "I just want to make them stop. I don't care what it takes. Hypnotism, radical experiments, drug trials. I just want my life back," Adrian reiterated. "This is going to take some time for me to go over. Maybe we should have a sit-down in a week to go over this," Dr. Clark suggested. Brenner was already feeling relieved for coming, and thanked the therapist for taking the matter so seriously. He even went home that evening and got a peaceful night's rest, unaware of the fact that he was passing on a curse to another unsuspecting party. Clark scoured the notes once he returned to his hotel room, looking over the different places that Adrian had been visited by the specter, and then chose to draw up a map. Slowly and carefully, he was seeing a pattern emerge and noticed that the Dullahan was using traditional structures, almost as if it were studying and methodically hunting the younger man. As a hallucination, it was very intuitive and strategic, for Brenner's notes would always highlight that he thought he could outwit the ghost, only for the Dullahan to find a way to become a looming persona in his life. Dr. Clark assumed, of course, this was merely an aspect of the poor man's delusion. He has made this fantasy so elaborate it has become impossible to distinguish from reality. Clark thought sadly. As the hours wore on, he couldn't help but to also visualize the encounters with the monster, and he decided, despite the hour, to try an experiment. 3 times in the journal, Adrian reported that he saw the Dullahan near to the park at night. Somehow, Clark wasn't sure that the recurring location was a subconscious way of projecting some past trauma, so he grabbed a coat and went to investigate. The park wasn't far from the shoddy hotel Clark had been calling home, perhaps a 19-minute drive. Since traffic was light that night, he made it there in only 13. According to Adrian's journal, the Dullahan approached him near the bridge that separated the eastern part of the park to the west. The encounters were always at night, and the creature would often attempt to kill the poor man while he was trying to catch a smoke. Clark was already forming theories in his head about what was causing these delusions as he walked briskly against the winter breeze. Perhaps Brenner was experiencing guilt over the addiction to nicotine, and the Dullahan was a symbol of his subconscious desire to break the nasty habit. Or it could have stemmed from the stress the accountant was undoubtedly experiencing due to the myriad of business deals that he was likely in charge of. As he stood there and looked back across the park toward the bridge, Sebastian second-guessed even coming. The waking vividness of the nightmares that Adrian was experiencing couldn't possibly occur simply because of a set time and place, and certainly the phenomenon wouldn't happen to him. Still, though, the therapist wanted to see for himself if anything would actually happen, so he stood there against the bridge and kept waiting. The night was quiet. Not even the insects made a sound as he searched the empty park for any sign of life. It almost felt supernatural. But the Dullahan did not come, and Dr. Clark became certain that the creature was nothing, more than the sad, fractured hallucinations of a broken man. The next time Adrian came for a session, Dr. Clark had prepared notes on possible treatment plans that could assist the young accountant with his delusions. Medications that he planned to prescribe were at the top of the list, along with printouts and notations on alternate routes they could explore. I want you to review all of this with an open mind, Mr. Brenner. We can make real progress to treat this disorder head-on if we work together. We have to be on the same page. Sebastian insisted. Adrian said nothing as he took the notes and reviewed them. His hands were having slight tremors, which at first the doctor assumed was being caused by the pain or insomnia that his patient clearly felt. A moment later, though, Brenner surprised him and started to rip up the documents. "What are you doing?" Dr. Clark asked in shock. "I thought I had a chance coming to you. I thought you'd be different than all the rest," Adrian snarled, tossing the papers in the therapist's face. "This is nothing but a farce. You think I came to you for pills and to be coddled? My life is on the line here. I'm being pursued by something far worse than any normal treatment can possibly help. I need to kill the thing, not pretend it doesn't exist." Brenner snapped. He stood up, prepared to leave, and Clark tried to calm him down. "Surely you recognize how utterly ridiculous that sounds, Adrian. First off, I'm a man of medicine, not some mystic. My methods are practical. I've helped hundreds, perhaps even thousands, with disorders just like yours. I thought you, of all people, would understand that this isn't merely a disorder." Brenner snapped back. Sebastian balked at that, tilting his head slightly, and commented, "What do you mean by that statement?" The accountant looked at him with only contempt and remarked, "Don't try and deny it. I knew from the moment that I saw you. You've had the same vivid nightmare haunt you." Sebastian held back a retort, even as Adrian nodded with confidence. "You can't hide from it, Doctor. We're connected somehow. The Dullahan has chosen us for a reason." Clark's mind was spinning, trying to bring the conversation back to reality. "I tell you what, let's make an agreement. You say that the Dullahan is in pursuit of us? For whatever reason, there must be some merit to confronting the beast. Then let me propose this. We meet tonight at my hotel and together attempt to make contact with this headless monster. If it's as threatening as you claim, then we should seek a way to dispose of it together. What do you say to that? The doctor responded. He was expecting Adrian to back down from the preposterous idea. But the therapist should have known better than to wager with a man that had nothing to lose. What's the address? Brenner asked. It was too late to back out now, Sebastian realized. But perhaps this could finally give the poor man some way to find relief from his delusion, he reasoned. I'll email it to you shortly. Be there around 8 and we can face our demons together. During the interim hours of their next casual appointment, Sebastian decided to research the history of the legendary Dullahan. By finding all the different theories and origins of this myth, perhaps I can discover a way for both Adrian and myself to rid our minds of these vivid monsters, he reasoned. The Celtic tales varied from website to website, but a few general features stuck out. Perhaps what was most well known was his headless appearance, and there were many stories that suggest how he lost his head, one of which being that he was a soldier in his previous life and had his head taken from him in battle. His roaming is being depicted as him searching for his lost head for all of eternity. However, some stories suggest that he already had his head, and that he rides with a darker purpose, believed to be so bitter about his own death that he searches for other souls to take with him to the afterlife. Sebastian remembered that the creature was commonly portrayed as either riding on the back of a black horse, also headless, or riding a black carriage that is pulled by 6 black horses. But neither of those seemed to feature in the nightmares he and Brenner were experiencing, so he moved on. Many of the legends circled around how the monster was meant to be a warning of some kind, telling all to stay out of the Dullahan's path. No locked gate stays closed when he approaches, bursting open to let the Dullahan through. As he makes his way through towns and villages after dark, the people hide behind their curtains because if anyone were to look at him, they would be immediately blinded or far worse. This he causes by slashing their eyes out with a whip made from a human spine or by throwing a basin of blood into their eyes. The site said that the nightmare had the ability to speak only once on a journey, and that is to say the name of the person whose life he wishes to take. Once the Dullahan states this name, that person's soul is called to death, and there is no defying this call. Sometime during the wait, Dr. Clark nodded off, imagining this ferocious creature chasing after him fervently. As much as he wanted to confront it, the terror he felt any time the Dullahan was near was too great to ignore. A knock on his door startled him awake, and he led Adrian into the messy apartment, wishing that he had never even researched all of the grisly details of the monster. "You've seen him recently?" Adrian asked. Sebastian didn't really bother to deny it, and instead encouraged the stranger to sit and got them both a bottle of wine. "I think we need to figure out exactly how we can summon it," he remarked. "And how to kill it?" Adrian suggested. "The research I found is unanimous of that. Destroy the head," he said, dismissively, as he opened the curtains to the hotel balcony to let in the cool night air. "I've never seen a creature carrying a head, have you?" Brenner whispered. "No, but again, I've never entertained the idea that the monster might be real." "Then you will be his victim," Adrian said decisively. Sebastian chuckled at that, as the two men shared wine and some snacks. Clark was thinking about his wife, how he could be with her now instead of here. done a lot of wrong in my life, he admitted as they let the night pass them by. Do you believe the Dullahan is aware of our sins? Adrian asked. I think it's a manifestation of our guilt, Sebastian admitted. My wife Olivia warned me this job would take me over, eat away at my soul. It's become my every waking moment for so long, I honestly don't know what I would do without it, Clark explained. But you seem so well put together, calm and conservative, Brenner said. I think your co-workers likely said the same thing of you before you let this obsession get the best of you, Dr. Clark remarked. The young accountant smiled and looked toward the window, but then his expression changed to one of horror. Don't look. He's here, Adrian said in a faint whisper. Sebastian resisted the impulse and decided to play along. This was, after all, what he'd hoped would solve the problem. What does he look like? The therapist asked. Tall, dark, very strong. A cloak as black as night. An axe that is ready to rip you limb from limb. He shivered. Adrian stood frightened and was about to run when Clark snapped. No! We said we would confront it together, and that's what we will do. I can't. No, please, Brenner said as he began to sob. He has chosen you, Sebastian Clark. He demands your soul tonight, Adrian said. My soul? If it even exists, I gave it up for this job long ago, he said dismissively. Sebastian finally turned around, unsurprised to see the balcony was empty. Then, suddenly, Adrian tried to push him toward the edge. The doctor let out a yelp as he twisted about and tumbled, narrowly avoiding the ledge. Adrian Brenner was not so lucky. He fell over, crying out in surprise, as he gripped the balcony and hung on for dear life. What the hell is wrong with you? He asked in shock. But something else had also gone terribly wrong in a short burst of aggression. Adrian's shirt was tightly wrapped around his neck, suffocating him as he clung to the rails. I'm sorry, Clark. I'm sorry. I didn't want it this way, but it's fate. We're destined to meet. The accountant sputtered even as his doctor tried to save him. Then Sebastian saw something else in the man's eyes. An evil that lived there, a need to kill. And he hesitated. This was all for show. You never saw the Dullahan at all. You want to take on its charge and take the souls of those you don't think deserve them, Clark realized. Then another, darker thought crossed his mind. Who are you, really? Olivia told me how you treated her, casting her aside like garbage. I couldn't let that continue, not while you sat here in your penthouse, drinking wine and ignoring her, Brennan said as the strangulation got worse and he couldn't breathe. Of course, only Olivia knew about the dreams, Clark thought. He knew he could press charges, perhaps even convict his wife if he could prove the two were involved. But instead, Sebastian Clark made a human mistake. He watched as the life faded from Adrian Brenner's eyes and his neck snapped from the tightening noose of clothes. Then, as his body became limp, the noose became so tight that the man's head was severed from his body, causing it to tumble toward the swimming pool below first. It all seemed to happen in slow motion as Dr. Clark watched, stunned to see that in a bizarre way Adrian had become the Dullahan, his separated body and head floating eerily in the water below. The next morning Sebastian filed a report claiming an assault by Adrian and also called his wife. It's finally time to sign those divorce papers, was all Clark said. It made him feel like his spirit was being crushed at the finalization of it all. To think that she hated me this much to finish me off, he thought as he came into the office next day. Dr. Clark, I was just about to call you. You have a patient waiting, his secretary said as he arrived. My schedule was clear today. Did you tell them to come back? He asked. I think he was here before I was. I didn't bother him, sir. I just saw him sitting in there," the secretary said as she gestured toward the office door. Sebastian sighed and entered, wondering who was bothering to interrupt his day off. Then he froze as he saw the familiar face of Adam Brenner. Except that this time, the face was no longer attached to a body, but merely cradled at the side of the man's torso. The severed head had a terrible appearance, covered in rotting flesh that gave off the strong odor of rotting cheese, with a complexion of stale dough. His mouth was split into a terrifying grin, almost as if Adrian was finding joy in becoming the Dullahan, and taking the life of others like Clark. His eyes lit up with an evil fire as his body stood, and his free hand pointed a gruesome broken finger at Clark. "It's all in your head. It's all in your head. It's all in your head." The doctor mumbled again and again as he tried to not tremble in fear. But even the most imaginary of evils can cause the most real harm.
Ford Street Bridge, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Wednesday, September 10, 2021, 11:55 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Willis, hurry your ass up. Can't you hear all those sirens blaring? Smell the smoke? Gunshots are popping off like 4th of July fireworks, and the sky's a funky-ass green. Ronnie told us to leave over 2 hours ago. Everyone else split. We're the only fools left. Ain't you been paying attention? Downtown Minneapolis is a war zone, and we're only a few blocks away. Glancing over his shoulder, Derrick fought the urge to grimace. Chester McFarland, the newest member of the crew, was not someone he enjoyed being around on a good day. It still rubbed him raw he wasn't the site foreman, the position given to a man with less experience. He wished Ronnie McDaniel, owner of McDaniel Bridge Repair, had never hired the loser. Yes, Chester knew his way around a construction site, yet his experience was not enough to counteract a terrible demeanor. Chester was loud, obnoxious, opinionated, and a closet racist who let his antiquated ideas slip out after one too many beers. One of his favorite topics to broach was Derrick's hotter-than-hot white wife, and how it angered him to see another potential mate lost to someone who should stick to his own color. 3 nights ago, it took all Derrick's internal fortitude to not rise to the drunken buffoon's ignorance. Maturity and wisdom enabled him to remain calm. Rude comments and snarky remarks about his marriage to Skylar had been something both he and his bride dealt with ever since their first date over 2 decades ago. In his youth, Derrick didn't have a handle on his anger. Numerous physical altercations with the same type of ignorant lowlifes resulted in the loss of 3 good construction jobs and 2 arrests and convictions for battery. Thinking about the injustice of those incidents made his gut roil. He never threw the first punch, only reacted in self-defense when verbal altercations turned physical. Yet he had been the one arrested. Risking a job loss now would be a major financial blow. The insurance company fought them at every turn regarding construction costs, trying to cut corners on materials, stalling because of the heat. Skylar's online party planning business was all but dead ever since the heat wave. Plus, she had just lost her mother after a long bout with bone cancer, and now they've been forced to move in with his father-in-law just to keep their heads above water. The thought of returning home, dropping the negative news on his bride, steadied his resolve to check himself. Rather than beating Chester to within an inch of his life, Derrick replied no woman of any color with a lick of self-worth or common sense would consider him a viable life partner. The other employees at the bar burst out laughing. Chester's face turned crimson red from embarrassment. Tonight, Chester's braggadocio alpha dog behavior had morphed over into that of a frightened goat. Derrick faked a smile while clicking off the flashlight. I had to finish up our jobs, Chester. If you're so antsy to leave, you should have helped me complete the final perimeter check to make sure everything's secured. The explosives and highly volatile chemicals don't need to be in the hands of the riders. Did you lock up the office trailer? No, I told you before I ain't getting out of this truck. The foreman watches while the laborers do the work. See now? That's why I'm your boss. Whoa! Chester jumped. That shot was close. Maybe 4 blocks. Any second, those riding fools are gonna come across the bridge. No, they won't. Derrick pointed up toward Ford Parkway to the east first and then the west. Those blue lights over there and there aren't for show. The cops have been stationed on each side for the last hour, making sure no one crosses. Didn't you pay attention to what Ronnie said before he left? Chester shook his head. When the mayor called him and said we had to leave, Ronnie reminded him about the explosives and chemicals, and that if no one was allowed to remain here to keep an eye out for looters, they might get stolen. The mayor promised him he'd block the entrances to the bridge, and he kept his word, so stop worrying. Easy for you to say. My skin's the color those losers are out to get. You'll be just fine since you're one of them. I'm leaving. Get in right now or hoof it back to the apartment. Mentally chiding himself for leaving his work truck at the apartment because he had neglected to fill it up with gas the day before, Derrick's temper got the best of him. Chester, if you do something stupid like that, I can guarantee you will no longer be employed. Ronnie counts on us to do this job. A huge explosion drowned out Derrick's voice. Both men turned their gazes west toward Nicollet Avenue. Orange and red flames lit up the night sky. Derrick's stomach dropped. Turning back to Chester, he held up the key to the trailer, which was tucked away underneath the bridge, only feet from the raging Mississippi River. Give me 5 seconds to lock the office door. Chester muttered something unintelligible before putting the work truck into gear. He gunned the engine. The tires kicked up a spray of gravel as the vehicle sped down Mississippi River Boulevard. Derrick cussed a blue streak while running after him for several yards. It was no use. McFarland had floored it. Stopping to catch his breath, he glanced east. Highland Lane Apartments, the company's temporary home away from home, was several blocks away. All hell just broke loose on the other side of Ford Street Bridge, and from his limited perspective, it appeared crowds gathered on the east side too. And he was on foot. The distinct wail of a tornado siren blared all around, followed by a robotic voice. Martial law is now in place. Return to your homes immediately and shelter in place until instructed otherwise. This is not a drill. Repeating, martial law is now in place. Return to your homes immediately and shelter in place until instructed otherwise. This is not a drill. Derrick's mouth dropped open. He couldn't believe what he just heard. Yanking his cell from his back pocket while running back toward the construction trailer, he called Ronnie, praying he was awake and sober. "We're sorry. All circuits are busy. Please try your call again later." He tried again with the same result. When he tried the third time, his phone died. "Damn you, Chester. When I see you again, I'll pummel your ass like I should have at the bar." Once at the trailer door, he cursed again. The flashlight was dead. It took several seconds of fumbling in the dark to secure the deadbolt. For a split second, he wished for the days before cell phones, because that would mean the trailer had a landline. More gunfire erupted above his head, and this time it was close. And on his side of the bridge. Sweat poured down his face and back as he broke into a quick trot, heading east toward Mount Curve Boulevard as throngs of people swarmed the few police cruisers blocking the east entrance. Glass shattered. People screamed obscenities at the cops, demanding justice for the downtrodden. As a black man, he understood all too well their plight and full-heartedly agreed with raising concerned voices in protest. He did not, however, agree with the tactics used by some. How did burning, looting, brick throwing, and firing weapons at each other, destroying their own cities, help the cause? In his opinion, it only hindered. If his father were still alive, he'd be appalled at the current state of racism in America. The heat wave brought out the worst in humanity, resurrecting old prejudices and reigniting the smoky embers of hate. Reverend Ezekiel Willis believed violence begat violence, and the only way society would change was when individuals examined their own hearts and extracted hate, replacing it with God's love. A weird pop, followed by a loud whoosh, made him glance upward. A cloud of thick, viscous vapor surrounded the protesters. The few he could see staggered backward while coughing. Some spit and a few vomited. In seconds, the nasty aroma reached Derrick's nose. Tear gas. He zigged the opposite direction. Calm down. Everything's locked up. Time to head out. It'll be a hard run in the heat, so just pretend it's another 2-a-day football practice with Coach Klein. Get to the apartment, get some gas, and head back home. In less than a day, I'll hug Skylar and Brandon so hard they might break. Just as he neared the pavement, his eyes started watering. He stumbled when his right toe connected with something hard. He tried to stay upright, arms flailing, but it was no use. His left knee slammed into the ground, sending sharp pangs up into his gut. The cell phone flew from his pocket, landing glass side down on the concrete. He heard the screen shatter. Rolling over onto his back, he bit his lip to keep from yelling out in pain. He grimaced while staring up into the hazy sky. The stars were hidden by gray smoke. The yellowish beams from the streetlights on the bridge and the azure blues and crimson reds from the police cruisers barely made a dent. Yup, just like 2-a-days. Coach Klein always said my feet were too big for my body. Okay, suck it up. Now is not the time to be sidelined with an injury. A dark-colored SUV zoomed past him with its headlights off, sliding to a stop by the temporary metal building housing the explosives and chemicals. 2 people jumped out, yet the interior light of the vehicle did not come on. The motion sensor by the fence kicked on, bathing the area in light. Both bodies were covered in head-to-toe black, and if they were female, they were the biggest women he had ever seen. Each carried what appeared to be M16s or maybe AR-15s. One punched in the code to the gate surrounding the building, and it slid open. Another SUV sped by, stopping inches from the gated entrance to the Ford hydroelectric plant. 2 more black-clad individuals stepped out. One approached the security checkpoint. Good. Looks like the mayor took Ronnie's warning seriously and sent in 2 CIRT teams. What a relief. Though I'm surprised only 4 arrived. Guess 4's better than 0. Watching both groups for a few more seconds to give his knee time to quit throbbing, he contemplated signaling the duo near the construction shed and requesting help. They probably weren't allowed to leave their posts, but they might be willing to contact someone to come rescue him. The one on the far left ran over to the breaker box, cutting the power. The lot went dark. The only lights remaining from the bridge, police vehicles, and water plant cast wimpy beams down to his location. Just as he turned his head, the hydroelectric plant's lights blinked once before disappearing. The area was bathed in semi-darkness. Ignoring the weird sensation from deep within, some internal instinct warning him to remain quiet and keep himself hidden behind the clump of scrub brushes, Derrick stood. He needed help to get out of the area. Snatching the destroyed cell from the ground, he stared at the cracked screen. He stuffed it back into his pocket before hobbling toward the storage area, his footsteps muffled by thick grass. Legion Chaos 3 to base. Go ahead, Legion Chaos 3. The distinct crackle of radio chatter made him freeze mid-stride upon hearing the words Legion Chaos. The voices had no discernible accents. They were cold, enunciating every syllable and almost robotic. Despite the heat, every hair on Derrick's body stood erect, a strong signal something wasn't right. In position and ready for approval to deploy. It is a go. Black Lamb is 11 meters south of your position. You have been spotted. Acquire target. Now. Derrick's mouth went dry as 2 heads turned his direction. Panic skittered up his spine, making his legs tremble. Though he wasn't a soldier, nor had he ever been in law enforcement, He had played enough simulated war games with Brandon to realize the men weren't sent in to guard the construction site or the hydroelectric plant. Black, unmarked SUVs with the lights off. No interior lights upon exiting vehicles. Military-grade weapons held by completely camouflaged individuals who spoke like AI drones. Power cut off to both sets of building lights. Knowledge of the gate codes. A sick, twisted thought wormed around inside Derrick's head. They were sent to destroy both the bridge and the hydroelectric plant and blame the destruction on the black sacrificial lamb. You have been spotted. Black lamb. Acquire. Oh shit. They mean me. I don't want to know what comes next. Run! Pushing past the pain in his knee, he visualized Skylar and Brandon's faces, using his love for them as fuel. He broke out into a full-on sprint. He made it about 30 yards when something sharp and hot slammed into his back, catapulting him forward. Intense, excruciating pain burned through his entire body, shaking him like Tiger with his favorite chew toy. He collapsed into a convulsing heap onto the hard ground, body contorting into the fetal position. Unable to control his limbs, mind engulfed by overwhelming terror, he could do nothing to protect himself as the sound of boots drew closer. Oh God, help me. I know I haven't spoken to you in years since Dad died, and I'm sorry, but I'm begging you, let me see my wife and son again, please. My life can't end this way. Legion Chaos 3 to base, Black Lamb acquired. Proceed with assignment. Acknowledged. Legion Chaos 3 out. A set of strong hands grabbed his wrists, while another set latched onto his ankles, lifting him several feet off the ground. Derrick wanted to fight back, to kick, punch, scream obscenities, but it was no use. His body swayed and bobbed as they carried him closer to the metal building. Within seconds, they let go. He landed on his side hard enough to knock the wind from his lungs. The sharp barbs embedded deeper, sending fresh waves of pain straight into his brain. It is pointless to struggle, Mr. Willis. The medical term for the experience is neuromuscular incapacitation. Now, it is time to watch. You are about to make history. Uh-oh, he knows my name. Great, these are government tools. Damn it! Ahead loomed in Derrick's line of vision. Faint strobes of blue and red from the police cruisers on the bridge made him appear like a character from a spy movie. The man's entire face was covered with a thick black material. Only a set of eyes were visible. The jade-green orbs blinked twice. The sense of worry from before morphed into terror as he met the man's gaze. There was no humanity or trace of compassion, nothing but a cold, dark stare. An unseen hand jerked his head to the left. Derrick couldn't believe the images his eyes relayed back to his brain. One of the men closest to him shed all the black clothing and combat boots. Underneath, he wore a yellow shirt with the distinct logo of McDaniel Bridge Repair, a pair of denim jeans, and steel-toed boots. He turned and smiled. Derrick's blood whooshed in his ears. He looks enough like me. He could be my twin. The man with the green eyes addressed one of the other men not in Derrick's line of vision. Cell ready to record? Affirmative. Excellent. Proceed. I will keep an eye on our little lamb. Derrick's creepy clone took off toward the building housing the explosives. The other two men followed, one holding a cell phone, muttering words Derrick couldn't quite make out. In that instant, he knew what was about to happen and the blame placed on his shoulders. Get up. Run. Derrick made a weird mewling sound as he tried to move. A fresh flow of electricity hit him so hard his teeth clanged together. His captor leaned closer. A different, strange electrical current arced up Derrick's spine. That little burst was your only warning. Try to move again and the next shock will be enough to render you unconscious. Are my instructions clear? Derrick couldn't reply. Instead, he let his eyes speak for him. Good. The body count just increased dramatically. The rioters broke through the barricades. It is amazing how fast they scurry, just like ants. Oh, stop looking so distraught over the upcoming loss of their pathetic lives. Collateral damage accentuates emotional responses by the masses. Those morally bankrupt cretins deserve the comeuppance.
No, they don't. You are all cruel bastards.
Such language for the son of a preacher man. The man laughed. I do not understand why you consider it cruel to give people what their hearts desire. Their insatiable cravings drove them to loot, pillage, scream, and shout for months, insisting upon a society liberated from the bonds of morality, justice, and especially law enforcement. A surging tide of disbelief and destruction, generations in the making, is coming full circle. Too bad you cannot see them from your perspective. They are like sheep with blind eyes wide open, giddy at the prospect of chains being lifted. It is what the world wants now. Freedom from the constraints of believing their choices and actions carry consequences. Each generation gains knowledge and power, yet in exchange for their enlightenment, eschewed the traditions of their elders. They are narcissistic fools. None of them stop to consider the true price for such ridiculous requests. No matter, their cravings will be satiated now. The old Chinese proverb, "Be careful what you wish for, lest it come true," never rang truer. Do you agree? This isn't happening.
No, I don't agree. Who are you people? Why are you doing this? How can you hear my thoughts? God, please stop them. No one deserves to die like this.
A weird flapping noise above caught his attention. A host of black crows filled the sky. Some landed next to them, others in the trees. One perched directly on the man's left shoulder. No, not crows. Ravens. God is dead, have you not heard? I believe the year was 1966 when Friedrich Nietzsche declared so on the cover of Time. I realize the declaration was prior to your birth, but you studied history in school, and I know you conversed about the subject numerous times with your father, Ezekiel. Oh, my mistake. The correct word is argued, not conversed. If I recall correctly, the last time you two discussed the existence of God was the night before you left for college, during a wicked argument about your relationship with Skylar. Derrick's mind spun. How does he know I was praying? About Skylar? The argument with Dad? Maybe I am unconscious and this is some weird dream? Please let that be the case. We all know everything about you, Mr. Willis, including how deep your anger runs. Oh, you have managed to hold it at bay the last 9 months when Ronnie bypassed you for the position of foreman and gave it to the Neanderthal Chester McFarland, but it still resides inside you, bubbling and churning, itching to be set free. You almost let it run wild at the bar 3 nights ago. After their betrayal, I know you regret the decision now. Their betrayal? What does he mean? I see the jolts of electricity provided quite a bit of mental fogginess. Allow me to guide you to the truth. Your perceptions about Chester are on target, yet for some reason, you missed the same red flags in Ronnie. Both men share the same ideologies about race. They stewed privately for months, watching all the civil unrest, the riots, the utter chaos. Chester functioned as a ringleader of sorts, pushing and urging Ronnie to make a statement. A big, bold statement about you, Well, more specifically, about your race. How do you think we obtained the gate codes? Why Ronnie and all the other employees left, leaving you and Chester to close? Why Chester fled?
Ronnie would never do such a vile thing.
Your current predicament proves he did. Derrick's mind spun from the betrayal. Enough of wallowing in self-pity for your naivete and blindness, Mr. Willis. Time is short, so I will answer your other question. Yes, we. Well, the men with me are not part of my superior station. The man pointed toward the metal building before pulling a syringe from his boot. They are brainwashed pawns. Humans are so full of anger, so easy to manipulate, so eager to unleash their rage on each other. However, we do have something in common. We all crave the taste of fear, just for different reasons.
Superior station? Humans? This fool thinks he isn't human, okay? I'm out cold. I must be. This isn't real. Maybe I hit my head when I fell and not my knee?
Mr. Willis, you are a smart man, so stop trying to convince yourself none of this is happening. It is. We are not human. We are legion, and we are many. Our time to rise to power has arrived. Nothing can stop us. Derrick's mind went back to the sermons his father preached about spirits and principalities and how they interacted with humans.
No freaking way.
Still in disbelief, even when the proof is right in front of your face? Typical human. Now enough idle chit-chat. The clearing has begun. His time is nigh. It is showtime. You, well, a reasonable facsimile of you, have one of the many leading roles. How exciting. Your name will be known around the world in a few hours as the man who destroyed Minneapolis. Unfortunately, you will not be alive to pay for your crime. A stick and a sting and it will be over. The drug mimics a heart attack. After all, the authorities must be able to identify the terrorist responsible for so much destruction.
Release him, right now.
The ravens screeched, fluttering off with a collective whoosh into the night sky. The loud commanding voice came from somewhere behind him. Though he couldn't see the person, Derrick felt the strength and power behind the words, and he recognized the voice. Though that was impossible. The man with the syringe stiffened. A strange mewling sound, low and menacing, escaped his lips. If he really was awake, Derrick worried the taser caused major damage to his brain because the man's eyes instantly transformed from green to black, including the formerly white sections. The stench of sulfur filled the air when he spoke.
Es mi dunk, Mengel. Nem vela solo demon. This is our time. Go away. I won't answer you, demon.
Before Derrick could blink, the man lunged with inhumane speed, disappearing from his limited sight. The sounds of a scuffle from behind him broke out. Less than 5 seconds later, the man's body catapulted into the air, crumpling to the ground directly in front of Derrick. His head smacked the pavement with a sickening crunch. A set of unblinking, solid black eyes stared at him. The dark orbs were sunken into the orbital sockets. Derrick knew he was dead, yet had no clue what killed him. He heard more noise to his left several yards away, and 3 distinct thumps, and then a lone set of feet walking back to his position. A cool hand touched his cheek.
Derrick, can you hear me?
Blinking twice to clear his head, concerned he did have permanent brain damage and was hallucinating, he gaped at the familiar face of his rescuer. Wide-set sable eyes beset with heavy creases, the broad, strong nose, the gray hair cut close, full lips parted into a warm smile. The scent of Old Spice lingered on the air. Dad? No way. He's been dead for 7 years. That's it. My brain is toast. He tried to sit up yet lacked the strength. Your brain is functioning properly, Derrick. I chose a recognizable form that will provide you comfort. Here, allow me to detach this torture device and then I'll get you out of here. A set of hands reached behind him, removing the metal probes of the taser embedded in his back. Despite the god-awful heat, the fingers were cool. A wave of dizziness threatened to overtake his mind. So, this is what a mental breakdown feels like. Skylar, Brandon, I hope you know how much I love you both. There now, all set. We need to leave immediately. It is not safe here. With every ounce of strength left, Derrick managed to turn his head toward the shed. If he was hallucinating, he may as well play it out. If the strange interactions were not from a demented figment of his damaged imagination, hundreds, perhaps thousands of people were in grave danger. Explosives. I know. The elderly man who looked exactly like his father bent down, scooping Derrick up. With unnatural strength, he hoisted him over his shoulder. He took off, heading south, legs strong and steady, pace beyond anything capable by a human. The ground whizzed by in a blur. The sounds of the sirens, shouting, and gunshots diminished to the point they were no longer audible. Mind reeling from an overload of unbelievable, impossible stimulation, Derrick fought to regain control. Mentally clawing and scratching his way through the murkiness inside his head and body, he sucked in several huge gulps of air. Stop. Put me down. Gonna puke. The second the words left Derrick's mouth, the man came to a halt and set him down with care on a nearby bench. After heaving into the bushes, Derrick glanced over to the sign to his right. It read, Resurrection Cemetery. His mouth gaped open. How in the world did we travel over 5 miles? Damn, my sense of time is all screwed up. Seems like it was only 10 seconds, maybe 15? Time is a human measurement. It means nothing in the ethereal plane. However, if you wish an answer, it was exactly 14.2. A massive headache throbbed in his temples, trying to wrap his mind around the fact he was conversing with a man who looked like his deceased father was too much to process. Will you please tell me what's going on? None of this makes any sense. Am I hallucinating? No. In the hospital hooked up to an IV full of morphine? No. Still out cold on the construction site? Again, no. Blowing out a huff of air as reality set in, Derrick studied the man. He was taller by a good 6 inches than his father, and a weird electrical current emanated from him like the other man, almost making him glow. He shook his head in disbelief. Earlier, you said a form was chosen I would recognize. The other dude with the funky eyes kept referring to humans like he wasn't one. Correct on both accounts. We are the same entities, just working for different sides. The skin on Derrick's arms stood erect. Are you trying to tell me he was a demon? And you're an angel? I am not telling you anything, Derrick. I am sorry, but we must part ways. You have 1 minute before the bomb explodes. Here are the keys to your vehicle. It is parked over there. The man pointed to Derrick's left before setting the keys on the bench. Turn right onto Lexington Avenue and follow the signs for the entrance to Interstate 35 East. From there, I believe you know your way home. A jolt of adrenaline blew through the final stragglers of doubt and confusion. Derrick jumped from the bench, stunned to see his work truck sitting at the end of the lot underneath a streetlight. Wait, this is all real? You're an angel, and old Green Eyes back there was a demon. Okay, I'll dip my toes into this pool of insanity. If what you said is true, why did you save me? We have to go back and warn everyone before they die. I am not allowed to veer from the instruction to save you and the others I'm assigned to protect. Even if I had the ability or interest in breaking protocol, it would not matter.
The demon no longer indwells the body of his host because I sent him back in chains to his eternal realm. The remaining 3 men made their choices of whom to serve years ago. Their hearts are hardened. No words or actions will break through the barrier they erected around their souls. It is too late for them. The man meant to be you has an incendiary device strapped to his body with a timer, one remotely controlled by the hands of someone I am not a high enough rank to stop. I must depart, as I have others to rescue. Go, now. Brandon will need you, soon. Remember Proverbs, chapter 22, verse 6. And one more thing you must not forget above all else. At a loss for words, Derrick cocked his head, waiting for more craziness to spew from the man's mouth. Operation Jade Helmet. Do not, under any circumstances, allow Brandon to play. When the game begins, everything changes. But Derrick didn't have a chance to say anything else. The man vanished in front of his eyes. Before he could grapple with the fact a person, an entity, disappeared as though never there, a huge explosion shook the ground. Turning his gaze northwest, he felt sick to his stomach while watching another ball of fire light up the dark skies. Oh my God, all those people. Instinct took over. After snatching the keys, he ran to the truck. In seconds, he was inside and cranked it to life. Gaping in disbelief at the full gas gauge, his packed bags, and a road atlas nestled in the passenger seat, he swallowed hard. A Bible that did not belong to him rested on top of the bags, opened to Proverbs 22. He didn't stop to read it as he recalled the earlier warning blaring across the tornado siren's speakers. Martial law. How am I going to make it over 850 miles without getting pulled over? His father's voice whispered in his ear. O ye of little faith, son. Follow the highlighted sections on the map and pay for your gas in cash at the designated stops. Drive. You will make it. There is still work for you to do. Cold shivers ran up his spine. Cash? Who carries cash nowadays? Do I need to go to the nearest ATM and... The glove box popped open. Derrick jumped as handfuls of 10s and 20s fell to the floorboard. Okay, I get it. Have faith. Drive. Those things I can do. Derrick Deshaun Willis wadded up the cash, stuffed the bills into his bag, slammed the truck into drive and gunned the engine, more than ready to get out of Minnesota and back home to his wife and son. The previously broken radio came on by itself, blaring Sam and Dave's Hold On, I'm Coming, which was his father's favorite song. Cranking up the volume, he sang at the top of his voice, thinking if this was all just a crazy dream, at least he had good music to listen to while driving headfirst into Insanityville.
Chilling tales for dark nights.